Take a picture. Oh yeah, with you?
No, stimulates a lot of. So you're answering questions, but you're also stimulating other questions.
Give your
But I like your point.
Over the course of the early part of the summer, my wife and I weren't sure what we were going to be doing in terms of vacation. And Mick was sending me almost an email every few days, and putting my marriage in potential jeopardy. But I realized how persistent he is, and so I'm absolutely delighted to be on this panel. Thank you, Mara, old friend. And I also happy to be back at the UN Bookshop. I mean, for anyone working at the UN, you know that the merch that they sell here is much better than the merch we have in the UN proper. And I used to always, before going on mission, come and get a new hat from the bookshop because they're much better than the ones we had at OSCHR. So the book, I'm taking a little bit of a different approach to this book, and I'm not entirely in agreement with Yasmin. The book is extremely well written. The book is not turgid, which for a UN audience is a balm. It's almost like a tonic. You can read it very quickly. It is filled with interesting anecdotes to support arguments, with references to academia, so it's not just anecdotal. It has, as Maher said, 4 crystal clear examples of the points that Mick is trying to make, and he essentially is trying to answer 4 questions that he poses to himself. So it's an eminently readable, extremely interesting, and I take it as a guide. It's like a manual for how you can think cleverly about mobilizing popular action in support of the right cause and the right vision and the right idea. And that there is a sort of technique to it, there's a cleverness to it. And as Mick said, if you avail yourself of some of the ideas contained in the book, it's immensely helpful. So all of you, please acquire the book and read it. Now, the observation. The book, like any good book, doesn't in the end answer all the questions. What it does, it stimulates the thirst for a second book. I see this as volume 1, and Mick has to start working on volume 2. The reason is this. I slightly disagree with Yasmin in the sense that the cause and the issues that Mick raises are absolutely fundamental. Fundamental in the context of the UN and outside the UN. What Mick hasn't dealt with in the book, and he needs to deal with in the next book, but this is all part of one continuum, is that many of the problems we face are not just the product of circumstance. It is willful policy by individuals. The fossil fuel industry, the top 8 companies are run by individuals. We know their names. We know what their backgrounds are. The people who are undermining very deliberately the international order for profit, we also know who they are. They're not nameless and they're not faceless. We also understand within the member states that states are not monolithic. You have champions within, and I think Mick brings this out in the book, and then people who are going to be weighing against any progress on the very issues that most citizens across the world care about. So it is a game of chess that Mick is inviting us to play, and he's giving us a lesson on the basis of his own experience that can help us. What we haven't progressed to, and this is the next book, is you can develop the basic understanding of how you approach these issues, which he does brilliantly, I think, and Global Citizen is just fantastic at it. But then you have to tailor it to each specific circumstance. And the issues are not simple, and they require very careful working through. So my appeal would be, first of all, you have to read the book. It's an excellent, excellent book. and all credit to you, Mick. And the next appeal is to urge him to now write the second one about how we deal with the very people who actually create the agony and the pain. Yeah? And I'm not sure, in one part of your book, you were saying that we should talk to everyone. That you mentioned David Beasley, colleague who used to run WFP. I'm not sure. There were certain limits beyond which I would never have been comfortable going. I was prepared to talk to many, but there are certain limits beyond which I'm not prepared to talk. And I think, so I would, there are variations on that. But above all is that the book makes you think. And I think it's the greatest tribute that can be paid to any author, that he's providing us with amazing pearls of wisdom, but he's also making us think and thirst for more. So well done.
I think, Maha, just to quickly respond to that, and I like the point.
So my question is, how does your book tackle the concept of power? And how do policy entrepreneurs and change makers handle the power play and politics in international development? And in addition to that, I have a sub-question. How different is the toolkit for those who are less resourced, less powerful, less privileged? Is there a toolkit for pursuing change different from those who are well off? And this is it. And again, thank you for the inspiration, Mick.
It's an immensely difficult question to answer because you need an immense amount of knowledge and a precise knowledge to know how to move a particular system. But you can compensate with complete courage, moral clarity, right, which is absolutely required. And here at the UN, something we're not good at is moral consistency, right? To be consistent. The hardest work, and this is something that actually Mick touches on in the book, that you do is often in your neighborhood, in your family, in your community. Prejudice, chauvinism, the scramble for economic power, the scramble for commercial power. It's a rather primitive way of thinking. It sort of speaks to our reptilian nature more than anything else. And then fear stokes reactions to it. And so you have to overcome it. E.O. Wilson at Harvard pointed out that there are only 3 species on this planet that will sacrifice for the good of the whole species. Ants, bees, and human beings. That we would give up that first instinct of self-preservation to sacrifice for everyone else is an amazing thing that people will do. And so if you don't have the command of knowledge, you can surely show courage and understand what consistency is and what clarity is. And so you remind me very much, I was in a small community in Sri Lanka when I was High Commissioner, and the very same question was raised to me. They said to me, High Commissioner, we're a small community, we're a Tamil community here, we have no power, we have no this, we have no cars, we have no money. And I said, yes, but you have good ideas, you have shown courage. All you need is a way of disseminating the idea, and you're already in a position of leadership, whether you know it or not. So, but the idea is really couched in precision. Much of the upheavals we see in the world can be traced to individuals doing things which they ought not to have done. Right? I mean, you can go back and say populism in Europe after the Second World War. How did it begin? Well, clearly there you had the National Fronts in France and the UK, 1968, 1972. You had on the other end of the ideological spectrum, you had the communists in Italy, the Radical Party, and so forth. But then it all began really in Carinthia in 1986 with Georg Haider in Austria, and then Berlusconi came after him and opened the door wide. So their names, they're people we know, they shouldn't be hiding, or at least let's say their ideological descendants shouldn't be hiding. And quite frankly, and this is where I think the UN always can do more, is that, and here perhaps, if there's one appeal in terms of the book, I was always uncomfortable with the idea of shaming by virtue of highlighting something. Because it almost implies that the other side doesn't feel any shame for its own actions. Right? So the shaming shouldn't come from the highlighting. The shaming should come from the people who deny their own people access to proper health care because the climatic conditions are changing, access to a normal way of a livelihood because sea level rise is occurring. And it's that sort of thing where the shame should be positioned. But courage can mean a lot. I mean, look, you just have to sit in the UN in any meeting. When I was PR for almost 18 years, there's not much confrontation that takes place outside of the Security Council, right? And if it is, it's on little things, some words here or there and so forth. But a sort of intellectual honesty about the state of the world and where it needs to go, sometimes it's missing. And it's always refreshing. I mean, we used to have ambassadors in the past who were just so outrageous and they were fun to listen to, but they weren't cowed into silence because of the atmospherics of the UN. And I think a little bit that's gone missing, and that's what we need to bring back.
Mick will stay here to sign copies for you. And I also would like to reiterate maybe Zeid's challenge for you, Mick. Version 2.
It was funny, I got told when they gave it to me and they said Audible, I was expecting to be able to do it myself, and they said, oh, you're not big enough yet, and they got another Australian living in New York to record it instead. So it comes down to how successful book one is. But yes, I'll definitely do that. And maybe I'll take you up to properly interview this time and put your stories on record. But yes, that would be great.
Well, thank you all. Thank you everyone for being with us.